Chapter 30. The night before the gala. The neon lights of Serendel flickered through the narrow alleys as Ellie and Marcus navigated the labyrinthine streets, their footsteps muffled by the damp pavement. The city, with its oppressive architecture and constant hum of surveillance, felt colder than ever tonight. The grand gyno-fascist gala loomed, and the stakes had never been higher. Ellie clutched the map in her gloved hands, her eyes scanning the scribbled notes and coordinates. "We're getting close," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "My mom's hiding somewhere around here." Marcus nodded, his brow furrowed. "We need to be quick. If we can convince her to join us, it could change everything. But we need to make sure she understands the truth about the regime." The alleyways grew narrower, and the oppressive sense of being watched intensified. Finally, they arrived at an old abandoned building, its facade covered in grime and shadows. Ellie's heart raced as they approached a side entrance. She knocked gently, the sound echoing ominously in the silence. After a tense moment, the door creaked open, revealing Serena Brighton. Her face, though pale and haggard, was marked by a fierce determination. "Ellie? Marcus? What are you doing here?" Ellie stepped forward, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and worry. "Mom, we need to talk, this is important." Serena's gaze flicked nervously to Marcus, then back to Ellie. "Why should I trust you? The state has made it clear." "The state has lied to you," Marcus interrupted, stepping into the dim light of the room. "We need to tell you the truth." Serena hesitated but stepped aside, allowing them to enter. Inside, the space was cluttered with old furniture and dusty relics. Ellie and Marcus took a seat at a small table, and Serena settled opposite them, her eyes wary but curious. "Mom," Ellie began, her voice trembling with urgency, "you need to know that the gyno-fascist regime is a lie. The learned elders, the ones they use to justify everything, they don't exist." Serena's eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face. "What are you talking about?" Ellie continued, her tone desperate. "We infiltrated their inner sanctums, we saw it with our own eyes. The so-called learned elders are a fabrication, a myth to keep everyone in line. The regime uses fear and control to maintain power." Serena's face tightened as she shook her head. "No, that's impossible. I remember meeting them. When I was younger, they came to our town and spoke to us directly. They were wise and powerful. They even blessed us with visions of a perfect society." Ellie's brow furrowed in confusion. "Mom, what are you talking about? Those memories aren't real. They've been implanted in you." Serena's eyes filled with confusion and pain. "But I remember their presence so clearly. They told us about their vision for the future, their plans to bring about peace and prosperity. I remember their voices, their reassuring words. They guided us." Ellie leaned forward, trying to understand. "Tell me more about these memories. What exactly do you remember?" Serena's face softened as she began to recount her memories. "I remember being a child, and our town was visited by the learned elders. They arrived in grand, elaborate carriages, their cloaks flowing behind them like shadows of the night. The townspeople gathered to hear them speak. I recall the way they spoke with such authority and grace, their voices resonating with promises of a utopia." Her eyes glazed over with nostalgia. "They performed rituals to bless us, touching our foreheads with their hands. I saw visions of the future, a land of peace and harmony, where everyone lived in perfect accord. I remember the warmth of their presence, how they made us feel special and chosen." Ellie's heart sank as she listened. "Mom, those memories, they're false. The Harmony Nexus implants them to make you believe in the regime's mythology. They want you to remember things that never happened, to control your perception." Serena's face paled, and she reached up to touch the side of her head, where the Harmony Nexus was implanted. "I didn't know. I thought it was just a routine procedure. I didn't realize they were manipulating me." Panic surged through Ellie as she realized the implications. "The Harmony Nexus has remote monitoring capabilities. They can track us, know where we are." Suddenly, the weight of their situation hit Ellie. She glanced nervously around the room, her mind racing. "We have to leave now. They could already be on to us." Marcus nodded in agreement, grabbing Ellie's arm. "Let's go. We need to get out of here before it's too late." Serena's eyes were filled with a mix of fear and regret as she stood up. "What do we do? Where can we go?" Ellie and Marcus hurried towards the door, their hearts pounding. Serena stood at the threshold, looking helplessly at her daughter. "I want to help," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I can't leave. They'll come for me if I do." Ellie's voice was choked with emotion. "We can't stay. We have to protect ourselves and the mission." With one last look, Ellie and Marcus dashed into the night, their footsteps echoing in the narrow streets. The sound of distant sirens and the ominous hum of surveillance technology heightened their sense of urgency. As they fled the building and disappeared into the night, the realization of their precarious situation settled heavily upon them. Instead of heading back to Lady Siobhan McGregor's Highland retreat, Ellie and Marcus made their way to the hideout where the Crimson Coterie had been staying in Serendell. The hideout, a nondescript warehouse on the edge of the city, offered them a temporary refuge. As they arrived, the exhaustion of their ordeal was palpable. Ellie's heart ached with the weight of having to leave her mother behind. The conflict between her desire to save her mother and the urgency of their mission was a heavy burden. Inside the dimly lit warehouse, Ellie sat down in a corner where the horses were stabled. The familiar, comforting presence of the animals did little to soothe her pain. She began to groom one of the ponies with slow, deliberate strokes, her hands moving mechanically as she fought back tears. The soft, rhythmic sound of brushing was interrupted by the appearance of Mr. Whiskers, the cat from the dressmaker's shop. The cat slipped through a small opening in the wall, its sleek form moving gracefully toward Ellie. It rubbed up against her leg, purring softly. Ellie looked down at Mr. Whiskers, her eyes red and swollen. She let out a shaky breath, her emotions spilling over. The cat's presence, oddly comforting, provided a brief respite from her anguish. As she continued to groom the horses, the soothing rhythm of her actions mixed with the cat's gentle purring, offering her a moment of solace in the midst of the turmoil. With each stroke of the brush, Ellie tried to steady her thoughts, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. The mission was far from over, and the weight of their responsibilities pressed heavily upon her shoulders. As the night wore on, the stark reality of their fight against the gyno-fascist regime settled in, and Ellie steeled herself for the battles yet to come. Chapter 31. Victor's Descent. The prison's stark corridors echoed with the clinking of chains and the somber footsteps of the guards. Victor Hart's cell was a grim and unyielding structure of concrete and iron, cold and devoid of warmth. The only light came from a flickering bulb set high on the wall, casting erratic shadows that danced with each sway of its dim beam. Victor had been stripped to a thin, tattered shift, which barely shielded him from the biting cold. His body was a canvas of bruises and lacerations, the marks of the guards' brutal interrogations. Each day in the prison was a harrowing exercise in cruelty, designed to break his will and extract the secrets of the resistance. During one particularly grueling session, Victor was dragged from his cell to the interrogation room. The walls of the room were lined with dark stains, and the air was heavy with the stench of sweat and fear. He was bound to a metal chair, his limbs shackled and his wrists chafed. The guards, their faces masked with cruel smiles, prepared for another round of questioning. "Victor Hart," one of the guards sneered, "we've been quite patient. Now tell us about your little rebellion. Who are your allies? What are your plans?" Victor's gaze remained defiant. "I'll never betray them," he rasped, his voice hoarse from previous sessions. "You can torture me, but I'll never give in." The guard's smile widened, revealing a sadistic glint in his eyes. "We'll see about that." The guards began their torment, employing a variety of methods to break Victor's spirit. They started with physical pain, using electrically charged prods to deliver jolts of agony. Each shock coursed through his body, making him convulse in his restraints. Despite the pain, Victor gritted his teeth and refused to speak. Next came the psychological torture. The guards played recordings of the resistance's supposed betrayals. The distorted voices of his comrades filled the room, distorted and tainted to sow seeds of doubt. The lies and manipulations were designed to erode Victor's confidence and force him into submission. One guard leaned in, his breath hot and menacing. "What about the tenets of the learned elders of Project 2028? Surely you know something about their plans. Are you going to deny the supreme wisdom of the protocols?" Victor's eyes blazed with defiance. "The learned elders are nothing but a myth to keep you in power. Their so-called wisdom is nothing more than a tool of oppression." The guard's face twisted into a snarl. "Enough of your stubbornness. You'll give us what we want, one way or another. Victor was subjected to further brutality. The guards employed metal clamps that squeezed and twisted his limbs, their sadistic pleasure evident in their grunts and chuckles. Each clamp tightened, until Victor felt as if his limbs were being crushed. After hours of relentless questioning, Victor was finally returned to his cell, his body battered and broken. He collapsed onto the cold, hard floor, the pain from his wounds merging into a dull, constant throb. Sleep eventually overcame him, but it was far from peaceful. In the dead of night, Victor was jolted awake by the gnawing sensation of rats feasting on his injured flesh. The rodents had found their way into the cell, attracted by the scent of blood. Their tiny, sharp teeth dug into his wounds, sending waves of excruciating pain through his body. Victor tried to swat them away, but the rats were relentless, their tiny bodies scurrying over his battered form. He fought to remain conscious, each bite a cruel reminder of his vulnerability. The sensation of their tiny teeth scraping against his flesh was a horrifying juxtaposition to the cold, indifferent walls of his cell. As dawn approached, Victor lay shivering and in agony, his body a patchwork of bruises, cuts, and rat bites. The cycle of torment seemed endless, each day blending into the next in an unyielding monotony. His once powerful frame was now a shadow of its former self, and his spirit, though unbroken, was increasingly weary. The guards continued their relentless efforts, their cruelty a testament to the regime's resolve. The prison was a fortress of despair, a place where hope was a distant memory and suffering was the only constant. Yet even in the depths of his torment, Victor clung to the belief that the resistance would prevail and that his sacrifices would not be in vain. Chapter 32. The Fitting. Lady Siobhan MacGregor stood poised on the platform, allowing Madame Celeste to work her magic on the gown that would be her ticket into the grand gyno-fascist gala. The dress was a marvel of craftsmanship, blending the ubiquitous houndstooth pattern with subtle variations that only the most discerning eye would notice. Each fold and pleat was meticulously placed, designed to make Siobhan appear as though she belonged among the regime's elite, while still holding an air of quiet defiance. As Madame Celeste adjusted the hem, Mr. Whiskers, the dressmaker's sleek black cat, wound his way around Siobhan's legs, purring loudly. The cat's presence was both a comfort and a nuisance. His soft fur brushing against the fabric threatened to disrupt the delicate balance of the dress. "Mr. Whiskers, do behave," Madame Celeste chided gently, though there was no real reprimand in her tone. She continued to work, her fingers deftly pinning fabric, while Mr. Whiskers hopped onto a nearby stool, his green eyes observing the proceedings with a keen intelligence. Siobhan watched the cat with mild amusement. "He's quite the observer, isn't he?" Madame Celeste smiled, her attention still on her work. "He's my little spy, sees everything, hears everything, and occasionally shares a secret or two, though usually in his own way." As if on cue, Mr. Whiskers stretched out lazily, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the reflection in the mirror. Siobhan could almost sense the cat's approval as he resumed purring. Madame Celeste's voice lowered to a whisper as she continued speaking. "You know, my lady, during Lady Veronica's fitting, she had quite a bit to say about the power dynamics within the regime. She believes she should have more control, more than Evelyn Grace allows. She ranted about how Evelyn hoards power for herself, leaving nothing for those who deserve it." Siobhan's expression remained neutral, though her mind raced. Veronica's dissatisfaction isn't surprising, but it's always useful to know how deep the resentment runs. Mr. Whiskers chose that moment to leap down from the stool, landing gracefully on all fours before rubbing his head against Siobhan's ankle. His purring grew louder, a rhythmic sound that seemed almost conspiratorial. Madame Celeste glanced down at the cat, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "It seems Mr. Whiskers approves of you, my lady. He has good instincts, that one." The dressmaker continued her tale, her voice taking on a more hushed tone. "Veronica also mentioned Lord Gareth. She called him a puppet, too scared of Evelyn to ever speak his own mind. She thinks he's the weak link, someone who could be persuaded should the right circumstances arise." Siobhan glanced down at Mr. Whiskers, who was now staring up at her with unblinking eyes, as if daring her to challenge the information. "Lord Gareth has always been one to follow rather than lead, but to hear that even Veronica sees him as malleable is interesting." Madame Celeste leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's more. Veronica believes Gareth has been conspiring with Evelyn behind her back, playing both sides to his advantage. She was furious, called him a traitor in the most colourful terms. If there's any truth to that, it's something worth considering. Siobhan's lips curled into a subtle smile. You've given me much to think about, Madame Celeste. And this gown, it's a masterpiece. Madame Celeste stepped back, her hands resting on her hips as she surveyed her work with satisfaction. It's an honor to dress you, my lady. And as for the information, consider it a part of the service. Mr. Whiskers hopped up onto the platform beside Siobhan, nudging her hand with his head until she gave in and scratched behind his ears. The cat purred louder, his eyes half closed in contentment. As Siobhan admired her reflection in the mirror, she felt a sense of resolve settling over her. She would step into the lion's den, clad in the finest gown Serendel had to offer, with the knowledge that she held the upper hand. And perhaps, with Mr. Whiskers' silent approval, she might just tip the scales in her favor. Chapter 33, The Grand Entrance. The grand entrance to the Serendel Capitol building loomed before Siobhan McGregor and her troop. The imposing structure, adorned with banners of the gyno-fascist regime, was flanked by a regiment of elite guards, their houndstooth-patterned uniforms immaculate and their expressions severe. Siobhan, now fully transformed into the likeness of Lady Seraphina, one of the most revered and enigmatic of the learned elders, led the group with an air of absolute authority. Her dress, meticulously crafted by Madame Celeste, was a masterpiece of elegance, blending seamlessly with the opulent surroundings. The black and white checkerboard pattern of the tartan blankets on their horses, now perfectly dyed to blend with the houndstooth motif, added a subtle yet unmistakable touch of rebellion beneath their guise. As they approached the entrance, Ellie and Marcus, who had been accompanying the infiltrators, stayed close behind. Ellie, deep in thought, couldn't shake the memory of her mother, Serena, left behind in the city. She glanced over at Marcus, who was keeping a vigilant eye on their surroundings. Marcus, Ellie murmured, her voice tinged with regret. I can't stop thinking about what we had to leave behind. My mom. She was so sure about the learned elders. I had hoped we could convince her. Marcus looked at her with sympathy. We did what we had to do, Ellie. It wasn't safe for her to come with us, not with the Harmony Nexus monitoring her every move. Ellie sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I know, it's just, I keep wondering if there was something more we could have done. Before Marcus could respond, the captain of the guard stepped forward, his eyes narrowing slightly as he scrutinized the entourage. State your business, he demanded, his voice gruff and filled with suspicion. Siobhan, her voice perfectly modulated to exude the haughty authority expected of a member of the learned elders, did not hesitate. I am Lady Seraphina, here to oversee the final preparations for the Grand Gyno-Fascist Gala. My entourage and I are expected. The captain's eyes flicked to the rest of the group, each member of the Crimson Coterie and the Heart playing their parts with practiced poise. His gaze lingered on the horses, their black and white manes flowing like silk, the blankets covering them meticulously arranged. And might I add, Siobhan said, her eyes locking onto the captain's with an intensity that could not be ignored, I have always been impressed by the exemplary service of the guards here in Serendel. Your vigilance does not go unnoticed. The captain blinked, clearly taken aback by the direct compliment. Thank you, Lady Seraphina. Siobhan inclined her head slightly, maintaining her composed demeanor. It is well deserved. Now, let us proceed. Time is of the essence. The captain hesitated only for a moment before stepping aside, signaling for the guards to open the massive doors. As they passed, one of the guards, a young woman with a stern expression, glanced at Siobhan's horse. The magnificent beast's muscles rippled under its sleek coat as it moved with a grace that belied its power. Once inside, Ellie, Marcus, and the rest of the group moved quickly through the opulent halls, the grandeur of the gala's preparations evident in every corner. The air inside the Capitol building was thick with anticipation, and the hum of activity as servants and officials rushed to complete their tasks. As they approached the grand ballroom, Ellie felt a pang of sadness again, thinking of her mother and the uncertainty of their mission. Marcus, sensing her distress, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're almost there, he said softly. Once we're inside, we'll have a chance to figure out our next steps. We need to stay focused. Ellie nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. You're right, we need to see this through. Mr. Whiskers, Madame Celeste's ever-present feline companion, trotted ahead of them, tail held high as he investigated the grand surroundings. The cat's presence, though seemingly innocuous, was a constant reminder of the precariousness of their situation. As they moved through the intricate maze of the building, Mr. Whiskers paused at various points, seemingly studying the decor and the elaborate preparations. They continued deeper into the heart of the gala's venue, navigating through a series of lavishly decorated rooms and hallways. The air grew more charged with each step, the buzz of excitement mingling with the scent of exotic flowers and opulent fabric. As they approached the final set of doors leading into the grand ballroom, Siobhan glanced back at her troupe. "Stay close," she murmured. "We are not out of danger yet." Ellie's thoughts were a swirl of worry and determination as they neared their destination. She cast a final lingering look at Mr. Whiskers, who sat calmly by her side, his green eyes watching the proceedings with an almost knowing gleam. With a final deep breath, Siobhan, Ellie, Marcus and the rest of the troupe stepped forward into the grand ballroom. The room was a breathtaking spectacle of opulence and excess, the glittering chandeliers casting a warm glow over the assembled guests. The gala was in full swing, and the infiltrators' mission was about to begin. As the doors closed behind them, with a resounding thud, Siobhan took a moment to steel herself for the challenges ahead. The stakes were higher than ever, and one misstep could unravel everything, with Ellie and Marcus at her side and Mr. Whiskers silently observing. Siobhan knew that their success depended on their ability to blend seamlessly into this world of luxury and deception. The gala awaited, and with it, the future of the resistance. The infiltrators' resolve was as strong as ever, and they were prepared to face whatever came next. Chapter 34: The Grand Unveiling. The Grand Gyno-Fascist Gala was in full swing, and Evelyn Grace was poised to deliver her pivotal broadcast from her opulent office. The room exuded the grandeur expected of such an event, with its gold-leafed walls, sumptuous draperies, and an expansive desk that dominated the space. Evelyn sat at this desk, her poised demeanor belying the tension she felt as she prepared to address the public. "Citizens of the Gyno-Fascist state," Evelyn began, her voice echoing with practiced authority through the state's communication networks. "Tonight, we stand on the precipice of a new era, a future defined by unity and control. The Harmony Nexus represents not just technological advancement, but the very essence of our collective will. It ensures that no discord shall threaten our way of life. I have demonstrated the effectiveness of the Harmony Nexus and the essential nature of compliance to our grand vision." As Evelyn spoke, her words were broadcast across the city, filling homes and public spaces with her message. The grandeur of her rhetoric was meant to reinforce her control, to persuade the citizens of the Gyno-Fascist state of the benefits of the Harmony Nexus. Meanwhile, Siobhan McGregor and her troupe, disguised as the entourage of Lady Seraphina, a prominent member of the Learned Elders, navigated the winding corridors of the Capitol building. Their disguise had been meticulously crafted to blend in with the elite of the Gyno-Fascist regime. Mr. Whiskers, the enigmatic feline, led them with purpose, his sleek fur gliding through the shadows as he guided them along their path. Mr. Whiskers' guidance was direct and precise, his movements suggesting a deeper understanding of their mission. His eyes were sharp and focused, and he seemed to possess an almost intuitive sense of direction. As he led them, the group passed through several opulent chambers, each more extravagant than the last, their grandeur reflecting the wealth and power of the regime. The broadcast continued, Evelyn's voice growing more fervent as she reached the climax of her speech. "Tonight, I ask for your trust and your vote. Should I, your leader, be implanted with the Harmony Nexus? This decision will seal our future and solidify our collective strength. I assure you, the Nexus is the keystone of our enduring stability." As the infiltrators followed Mr. Whiskers, they encountered Lord Gareth, who was nervously overseeing the gala's preparations. Gareth's eyes widened in surprise as he saw the disguised infiltrators approach. "Lady Seraphina," Gareth exclaimed, his voice tinged with awe and anxiety. "I wasn't expecting you. What brings you here?" Siobhan, maintaining her disguise with regal poise, stepped forward. "Lord Gareth, we are here to ensure that the gala proceeds smoothly and to confer with Lady Evelyn Grace." Gareth's anxiety was palpable. "I must protest. The broadcast is live, and Lady Evelyn is preparing to make a crucial announcement. I cannot allow anyone to disturb her at this moment." Siobhan's eyes narrowed with calculated authority. "Lord Gareth, you must understand the importance of our presence. It is imperative that we speak with Lady Evelyn now. The future of our state depends on it. Gareth's hesitation was evident as he fidgeted with his robe. But, enough, Siobhan interrupted, her voice dripping with condescension. Do you truly believe you are in a position to question our authority? The learned elders' decisions are final, and it is not your place to deny us access. Under the pressure of Siobhan's words, Gareth's resolve crumbled. He gestured weakly toward the office door. Very well. You may enter, but please be discreet. With a nod of thanks, Siobhan and her entourage proceeded through the corridors, guided by Mr. Whiskers. The journey was fraught with tension, each turn and passage leading them closer to their objective. The opulence of the surroundings grew increasingly ornate, a stark reminder of the regime's wealth and power. As they neared Evelyn's office, Gareth's earlier protest echoed in their minds. The stakes were high, and their mission's success depended on their ability to blend seamlessly into the gala's proceedings. Finally, they reached Evelyn Grace's office. Siobhan, fully in character as Lady Seraphina, burst into the room just as Evelyn was concluding her broadcast. The scene was a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding outside the office. Evelyn's calm demeanor faltered as she saw the intruders. Lady Evelyn, Siobhan announced with authority, we have come to deliver an important message. Evelyn's eyes widened in shock. What is the meaning of this intrusion? Evelyn's expression shifted from surprise to recognition as she attempted to regain her composure. You cannot be here. It is not possible that. Siobhan's voice cut through Evelyn's protest. You have no authority over us, Lady Evelyn. We are here to make sure the gala proceeds as planned. Evelyn's eyes darted to Gareth, who looked equally bewildered. How is it possible you do not recognize a member of the learned elders? He asked, his voice quivering. Evelyn's face went pale as realization struck. There are no learned elders here, she stammered. It's impossible. We've. Chapter 35. The Vote of Destiny. As the emergency broadcast system flickered back to life, the city of Serendel found itself engrossed in an unprecedented spectacle. The grand gyno-fascist gala, which had been marked by opulence and grandeur, now faced an upheaval unlike any before. The broadcast that had been interrupted abruptly resumed, but the scene was dramatically altered. Siobhan McGregor, still disguised as Lady Seraphina, took center stage. Her presence commanded attention, and the public watched with bated breath as she began her speech. Evelyn Grace's desperate protests could be heard faintly in the background, adding a surreal layer to the unfolding drama. Citizens of the gyno-fascist state, Lady Seraphina began, her voice echoing through the broadcast with an air of authoritative calm. Tonight we face an unprecedented moment. It has come to our attention that there are doubts regarding our esteemed leader, Lady Evelyn Grace. These doubts threaten the very foundation of our state. In the background, Evelyn's voice was rising in pitch, her words distorted but clearly filled with frantic disbelief. This is a lie. There are no learned elders. You're being deceived. I've seen the truth. Lady Seraphina's expression remained inscrutable as she continued, weaving her speech with a mixture of urgency and calm. Our belief in the learned elders has been a cornerstone of our society. To preserve our unity and restore the faith that sustains our order, it is imperative that we reaffirm our commitment to our principle. The broadcast cameras panned to a close-up of Lady Seraphina as she delivered her next statement with a somber tone. I urge each of you to vote in favor of implanting Lady Evelyn Grace with the Harmony Nexus. This will not only restore her personal bliss, but reaffirm her faith in the guiding principles of our state. The Harmony Nexus will bring her back to the path of enlightenment and ensure her unwavering dedication to our collective vision. As she spoke, Evelyn's protests grew more desperate and frenzied, her voice rising above the broadcast. This is madness. Don't listen to them. I swear, there are no learned elders. This is all a fabrication. The public's response was mixed at first, but the broadcast's continuous emphasis on Evelyn's erratic behavior began to sway opinion. Doubts about Evelyn's leadership mounted, and the citizens' growing frustration and fear of instability made them more receptive to the notion that the Harmony Nexus might be the solution. The voting process was carried out with meticulous precision. Ballots were collected from polling stations across Serendel, and the tallying process was conducted under heavy surveillance. The public's mood was tense, their anxiety and curiosity palpable as they awaited the results. In the central counting hall, the scene was a frenzy of activity. Workers in pristine uniforms busily sorted and counted the votes, their faces etched with concentration. The process was elaborate, with multiple layers of verification to ensure accuracy. Ballots were fed into large mechanized counters that whirred and clicked as they processed each vote. The results were displayed on large screens for all to see, with live updates providing a constant stream of information. As the tallying progressed, it became clear that the majority of votes were in favor of Evelyn's implantation. The citizens' fear of uncertainty and the persuasive rhetoric of Lady Serafina had swayed them. The final numbers were projected in bold, dramatic letters across the screens. Votes for implantation, 82%. Votes against, 18%. The result was met with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The state's leadership, now assured of Evelyn's compliance, prepared for the next steps. Lady Evelyn Grace's fate was sealed, her personal struggle overshadowed by the broader narrative of state unity and control. In a final twist of irony, Evelyn's protests continued to echo through the broadcast, her claims of deception and betrayal falling on increasingly deaf ears. The public, now more convinced than ever of the necessity of the Harmony Nexus, prepared to witness the implementation of their decision. Chapter 36: The Transformation of Lady Evelyn Grace. The corridors of the Grand Gyno-Fascist Gala's medical facility were a stark contrast to the opulence of the event. Here the atmosphere was clinical and cold, illuminated by harsh, sterile lights. The walls, lined with pristine white tiles, echoed with the hum of machinery and the faint whir of automated devices. It was within this chilling environment that Lady Evelyn Grace was about to undergo a procedure that would seal her fate. Lady Siobhan McGregor, still cloaked in her disguise as Lady Serafina, presided over the operation with an air of detached authority. Her eyes, hidden behind the guise of solemnity, gleamed with a mixture of cold satisfaction and grim determination. The stark reality of the situation stood in sharp contrast to the glamorous facade of the gala outside. Evelyn Grace lay on the surgical table, her once resolute demeanor now a picture of apprehension. Her eyes darted around, trying to grasp the gravity of her situation. But the medical team's efficiency left little room for hesitation. The mechanized robot surgeons, cold, precise and devoid of empathy, prepared for their grim task with an unsettling efficiency. "Prepare the Harmony Nexus," Lady Siobhan commanded, her voice unwavering as she watched the robots assemble their instruments. The devices, meticulously crafted for their purpose, gleamed ominously under the harsh lights. The lead robot, a towering figure of chrome and steel, began its work with mechanical precision. Its articulated arms moved with unsettling grace, holding tools that seemed both alien and grotesque. The first step was the administration of a local anesthetic, which was administered with a swift, impersonal jab. Evelyn's consciousness dimmed as the drug took effect, her body becoming a mere vessel for the procedure. "Begin the incision," Lady Siobhan instructed. The robot's scalpel sliced through Evelyn's scalp with an eerie smoothness, the blade cutting through flesh and tissue with a sickening ease. The incision was precise, exposing the underlying structure of the brain with a series of meticulous calculated movements. The sight was both graphic and unrelenting, as the blood and cerebral fluid glistened under the lights. Evelyn's body twitched involuntarily as the robots continued their work. The mechanical arms delicately manipulated the Harmony Nexus device, preparing it for implantation. The device itself was a complex amalgamation of circuits and microchips, designed to interface directly with the brain's neural pathways. It was as much a marvel of technology as it was a harbinger of control. "Implant the Nexus," Lady Siobhan ordered, her gaze fixed on the operation with a mixture of grim satisfaction and professional detachment. The robot delicately placed the Harmony Nexus into the incision, its movements precise and unerringly accurate. The device was carefully integrated into Evelyn's brain, the intricate network of circuits melding seamlessly with her neural tissue. The final phase of the procedure was the activation of the device. The robots adjusted settings and calibrated the Nexus to ensure optimal function. With a final, decisive motion, the Harmony Nexus was fully operational. The incision was sealed with surgical adhesive, and Evelyn's scalp was meticulously sutured. As the procedure concluded, Evelyn's eyes fluttered open, and the initial haze of disorientation began to clear. Her mind, now interfaced with the Harmony Nexus, was flooded with a cascade of sensory inputs and artificial memories. The device's programming began its work, filling Evelyn's consciousness with fabricated experiences and a false sense of familiarity. Evelyn's confusion turned to an overwhelming surge of joy as the false memories took root. She recognized Lady Seraphina, her emotions a turbulent blend of adoration and relief. The fabricated memories of past encounters with Lady Seraphina, memories that never truly existed, became vivid and emotionally charged. "Lady Seraphina," Evelyn exclaimed, her voice trembling with genuine, if artificially induced, joy. "It's so wonderful to see you again. I feel as though I've known you forever." Lady Siobhan, observing from her position, maintained her composure. The satisfaction of witnessing Evelyn's transformation was tempered by the necessity of maintaining the ruse. Evelyn's reaction was precisely what had been intended, a complete, blissful surrender to the control of the harmony nexus. As Evelyn continued to revel in her newfound bliss, Lady Siobhan prepared to make her departure. The surgical team, having completed their task, began to clean and dismantle their equipment. Their movements a mechanical ballet of efficiency. Chapter 37. Philosophical Reflections. The night air outside the Grand Gyno-Fascist Gala's medical facility was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the artificial warmth and grandeur inside. Ellie and Marcus, now safely outside the walls of the imposing structure, found solace in the quiet of the city streets. The bustling noise of the gala had been replaced by a deep, unsettling silence as they walked away from the medical facility, where Evelyn Grace's fate had been sealed. They stood in the shadow of a large oak tree, the moonlight casting long, distorted shapes across the pavement. Ellie's face was illuminated by the soft glow of a nearby street lamp, her expression reflecting a mix of contemplative sadness and deep frustration. Marcus, equally troubled, paced nearby, the weight of recent events heavy on his shoulders. Ellie broke the silence first. "It's strange, isn't it, Evelyn Grace? She's spent her entire career enforcing the principles of the gyno-fascist regime, pushing everyone to conform, to embrace the harmony nexus, and yet, here she is, refusing it for herself." Marcus paused, looking at her with a furrowed brow. "Yes, it's a contradiction that cuts deep. Evelyn Grace has used the harmony nexus as a tool of control, demanding that others surrender their will and their sense of self. And yet, she's managed to avoid it herself, up until now." Ellie's eyes wandered, focusing on the quiet streets around them. "It's like she's been living a double life. On one hand, she's a fervent enforcer of the state's ideology, pushing for absolute conformity and bliss among the populace. On the other hand, she's never truly believed in the very thing she's been advocating. She's forced everyone else into a cage of bliss while keeping herself apart from it." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "It's a fundamental hypocrisy. She preaches the virtues of bliss and control, but in her heart, she's always known it's a lie. She's been using the harmony nexus to manipulate others, knowing full well the emptiness of its promises. It's as if she's played the role of a true believer while secretly viewing the entire system with contempt." Ellie's gaze fixed on the distant skyline, her expression troubled. "What does it say about the nature of belief and conviction? Evelyn Grace has made it her life's work to impose a set of beliefs on others, beliefs that she herself has never genuinely accepted. It's like she's been wearing a mask, hiding her true feelings while dictating what everyone else should think and feel." Marcus sighed, his voice carrying a tone of resignation. "It's a powerful reminder of how easily people can become trapped in their own lies. Evelyn Grace's refusal to embrace the very bliss she's enforced upon others is a testament to the hollowness of her convictions. She's used her position to control and suppress dissent, all while maintaining a facade of authority and faith." Ellie shook her head slowly. "It's almost tragic. She's been so determined to maintain her power and influence that she's lost sight of her own humanity. By forcing others to live under the guise of bliss and control, she's sacrificed her own capacity for genuine belief and connection." Marcus glanced at Ellie, his expression thoughtful. "In a way, it's a reflection of the broader system itself. The gyno-fascist regime imposes its ideals with an iron fist, demanding compliance while remaining indifferent to the personal struggles of those it controls. Evelyn's situation is just a microcosm of that larger hypocrisy." Ellie let out a deep breath, her frustration mingling with a sense of sorrow. "It's a sobering thought. The regime's power isn't just in its ability to enforce compliance, it's in its ability to create an environment where even those in positions of authority are forced to betray their own convictions. Evelyn Grace is a victim of that system, just as much as those she's oppressed. Marcus put a comforting hand on Ellie's shoulder. And it's that realization that drives us to fight, isn't it? Knowing that the regime's cruelty extends beyond the ordinary citizens, reaching even those who have wielded its power. It's a reminder that our struggle is about more than just resisting control, it's about reclaiming our own humanity and ensuring that no one is forced to live a lie. Ellie nodded, her eyes resolute despite the tears that had begun to form. Yes, it is. And it's why we must continue fighting, even when the darkness seems overwhelming. For every person like Evelyn Grace who's lost their way, there are countless others who still have a chance to reclaim their truth and their freedom. As they stood together, contemplating the weight of their reflections, the distant hum of the city seemed to fade into the background. The struggle against the gynofascist regime was far from over, and the path ahead was fraught with challenges. But for Ellie and Marcus, the understanding they had gained provided a renewed sense of purpose and determination. With a final, resolute glance at the moonlit streets, they turned away from the medical facility and began their journey back to their allies. The battle for truth and freedom was not just a fight against oppression, it was a quest to restore the integrity and humanity that had been so cruelly stripped away. Chapter 38: Temptations of Power. The Grand Gyno-Fascist Gala had concluded, but for Lady Siobhan McGregor, the battle was far from over. As she retreated to her private quarters, she found herself grappling with the weight of recent events and the seductive allure of the Harmony Nexus. The thought of wielding such immense power was both intoxicating and troubling. Siobhan paced back and forth in her elegantly decorated room, her footsteps echoing softly against the polished marble floor. Her mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts. She had spent years fighting against the oppressive gyno-fascist regime, championing the cause of freedom and resistance. Yet now, with the Harmony Nexus within her grasp, she was faced with a dilemma that tested her own convictions. The Harmony Nexus, a device that represented both the ultimate tool of control and the most profound violation of individual autonomy, lay on a nearby table. It was a symbol of the very tyranny she had fought against, yet its power was undeniable. The idea of harnessing such a tool for her own purposes was both alluring and terrifying. Siobhan's reflection in the mirror seemed distant, her eyes weary and conflicted. She had always prided herself on her commitment to justice and freedom. But now she was confronted with a temptation that threatened to undermine everything she had stood for. She sank into a plush chair, her fingers brushing the surface of the Nexus as she contemplated its potential. If I could use this, she murmured to herself, I could reshape the regime from within. I could dismantle it piece by piece, control the very forces that have sought to control us. A wave of guilt washed over her as she thought about her own desires for power. But is it any different, she pondered aloud, if I were to use this for my own ends? Wouldn't I be becoming just like the very people I've fought against? Siobhan rose from the chair and moved to the window, looking out over the city of Serendel. The lights of the city glimmered below, a stark contrast to the darkness of her thoughts. Her heart ached with the weight of her decision. What if, she continued, I could use it to bring about true change, to ensure that the gyno-fascist regime never rises again? Wouldn't that justify its use? As she wrestled with her inner turmoil, she heard a soft, rhythmic clopping sound approaching the room. Her horse, a majestic steed with a silvery coat that shimmered in the moonlight, entered the room with a calm grace. The horse had always been her companion and confidant, but tonight it seemed to carry an unusual aura of wisdom. Siobhan's gaze fell upon the horse, her heart aching with a mix of longing and regret. What would you do if you were in my place? She asked softly, half expecting no reply. To her astonishment, the horse's eyes met hers with a knowing gaze. Then, in a voice that was both soothing and direct, the horse spoke. Lady Siobhan, you are tempted by the very power you have sought to dismantle. You claim to fight for freedom and justice, yet here you are, considering using the Harmony Nexus for your own purposes. Siobhan was taken aback, her eyes wide with shock. You can speak? The horse nodded slowly. I have seen the depths of your struggle, and I understand the lure of power. But remember, the path you choose now will define not only your own future, but also the fate of those who look to you for leadership. If you wield the Nexus, you become what you despise. Siobhan's voice trembled with emotion. But what if it means saving countless lives? What if using it could end the regime's tyranny once and for all? The horse shook its head gently. True change comes not from adopting the methods of the oppressors, but from finding a way to overcome them without losing yourself in the process. The Nexus is a symbol of control, and to use it would be to betray the very principles you have fought for. Siobhan's heart sank as the weight of the horse's words settled upon her. The internal conflict she had been struggling with was now laid bare, and she could no longer ignore the hypocrisy of her own desires. She sat down heavily on the edge of her bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I've been so consumed by the desire for victory that I've lost sight of what it truly means to fight for freedom. I don't want to become the monster I've been fighting against. The horse nuzzled her gently, offering comfort and understanding. Remember who you are, Lady Siobhan. Your strength lies not in wielding the Nexus, but in staying true to your ideals, even when it is difficult. The real battle is not just against the regime, but against losing yourself in the process. Siobhan closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. The horse's words had pierced her soul, and she felt a renewed sense of clarity. She knew that the true path to victory lay not in succumbing to temptation, but in remaining steadfast in her principle. With a deep breath, Siobhan rose and walked over to the Nexus. She picked it up, feeling its cold weight in her hands. For a moment, she hesitated, but then with a resolute expression, she placed it back on the table. The decision was made. I will not become what I've fought against, she whispered to herself. I will find another way. Chapter 39, The Basketball Revelation. The dimly lit streets of Serendel were abuzz with the echoes of distant celebrations and the muted hum of a city that had become both a battleground and a beacon of hope. Ellie and Marcus, their hearts heavy with the weight of their recent discoveries and the burden of leaving Serena behind, had returned to the safe house where they hoped to find answers and forge a path forward. As they approached Serena Brighton's hideout, Ellie's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The weight of her mother's misguided beliefs was still fresh in her mind, and she was determined to free Serena from the grip of the Harmony Nexus. Marcus, ever the silent supporter, clutched his basketball tightly, his fingers drumming nervously against its surface. The hideout was a cozy, if cluttered, refuge in the heart of the city. It was filled with maps, old books, and the occasional flicker of candlelight. Ellie and Marcus entered to find Serena seated at a wooden table, looking both tired and apprehensive. Her eyes were drawn to Marcus's basketball, a curious smile playing on her lips. Ellie, Marcus, Serena greeted them with a weary smile. It's good to see you both. How have things been since we last spoke? Ellie took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. We've learned something important, Serena. It's about the Harmony Nexus and the so-called learned elders. They aren't real, and I need you to understand that. Serena's face crumpled with confusion and frustration. But I have memories, false though they may be, of interacting with them. I believed they were guiding us, helping us. Marcus shifted nervously, dribbling his basketball with an almost mechanical precision. He was lost in his own world, the repetitive rhythm of the dribbling offering him a semblance of control. His gaze flickered between Serena and Ellie, anxiety etched into his features. Ellie continued, her voice steady and convincing. I know it's hard to believe, but the Harmony Nexus is a tool of control. It implants false memories to keep us subservient. We've seen it happen. There are no learned elders, they're a fabrication. As the conversation continued, Marcus's dribbling grew more intense, his focus entirely on the basketball. The rhythmic thumping against the floor was almost hypnotic. Ellie noticed Serena's mounting frustration as she tried to reconcile the new information with her own implanted memories. Then, as if driven by instinct, Marcus accidentally misjudged a bounce, and the basketball flew out of his hands, striking Serena lightly on the head. Serena gasped, holding her head and wincing in surprise. The basketball rolled to a stop at her feet. The room fell silent. Ellie and Marcus exchanged a bewildered glance. Serena, still holding her head, seemed disoriented for a moment. I don't know what just happened, she murmured, looking confused. Ellie's eyes widened as she noticed something strange. Serena's demeanor seemed to shift. She appeared less affected by the Harmony Nexus, as if something had shifted within her. Marcus, still holding the basketball, began to grasp the gravity of what had just occurred. Serena, Ellie said gently. How are you feeling now? Serena blinked slowly, her eyes clearing. I feel different. It's like a fog has lifted. I remember things differently now. The learned elders. She paused, her face reflecting a mix of shock and confusion. They were never real, were they? I remember being told things that aren't true. I thought they were guiding us, but now it feels like a lie. Ellie's heart raced with hope. Yes, Serena. The Harmony Nexus creates false memories. It keeps people believing in things that aren't real. Serena shook her head in disbelief. I don't understand how I could have been so deceived. I thought the learned elders were real. I thought they were guiding us. Marcus, his anxiety giving way to a glimmer of triumph, spoke up. It seems that the basketball, when it hit you, it disrupted the Nexus's influence. Maybe it's not just a coincidence. Ellie nodded, her excitement growing. It seems like the basketball can indeed affect the Harmony Nexus. We need to test it further. Serena, now more coherent, agreed to their test. They carefully conducted a few more experiments, with Marcus using the basketball to lightly tap Serena on the head. Each time, Serena's responses became more coherent, her confusion waning, and her implanted beliefs seeming to falter. The realization hit them with a jolt of exhilaration. The basketball wasn't just a tool of play, it was a key to disrupting the Harmony Nexus. Ellie and Marcus quickly gathered their things, determined to spread the news to the Heart and the Crimson Coterie. As they moved swiftly through the winding alleys of Serendel, they encountered a few individuals with visible signs of Harmony Nexus implantation. With careful precision, they used the basketball to tap each one on the head, liberating them from their false memories and restoring a glimmer of their true self. The hideout was abuzz with the energy of their success as Ellie and Marcus burst in, breathless and excited. You won't believe what we've discovered, Ellie exclaimed. The basketball, it can disrupt the Harmony Nexus. The members of the Heart and the Crimson Coterie gathered around, their faces a mix of skepticism and hope. Ellie and Marcus recounted their experiences in detail, explaining how the basketball had disrupted the Nexus and freed Serena from its influence. With renewed determination, the group set out to use their newfound knowledge to liberate as many people as they could. The streets of Serendel became a battleground of liberation, as they used the basketball to free those under the Nexus's control. Ellie's heart was filled with a sense of purpose and resolve, as she and Marcus worked tirelessly to dismantle the oppressive regime's control. Their actions were a beacon of hope, and the basketball, once an ordinary object of leisure, had become a symbol of resistance and liberation. As the night wore on, Ellie and Marcus continued their mission, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they had found a way to challenge the gyno-fascist state's tyranny. The journey ahead was still fraught with challenges, but they knew they were no longer alone in their fight. Together with their allies, they would face the darkness and strive for a future of true freedom.